This is Kidnappings Are Not an Excused Absence by The Dark Elf. Read by Summer Shadows. Summary. We have your student. Which one? Fuck if I know. He's green and he's wearing a shirt that says pants. Fuck. Or, someone kidnaps Izuku, and Shouta just hopes that he won't have to break into his bail fund when the rest of the kids find out. We have your student. Shouta Aizawa pulled the phone away from his ear to blink at the unknown number. Of all the calls he was expecting at 5 a.m, a mere 20 minutes after he had finally fallen asleep after his patrol and final walk of the dorms, ransom was not what he expected. Arrest was always more likely with his kids. There hadn't been a full week without a vigilante episode since the sports festival. Which one? It wasn't that Shouta wasn't concerned that one of his kids had apparently been taken away sometime between him leaving the dorm and now. It was the fact that out of his 24 if he was including the bird and several extra Todorokis, only 2 of them woke up this early, and both were tied for first place for the Tried to Kill a Man award. That, and each of his kids required a different plan in order to rescue them. One student, in particular, involved him running as much interference as possible before the others found out, because if they were taken, he would have 23 murder children on the prowl. He really hoped they had taken the other one that would have been awake instead, if only to keep the possibility of collateral damage as low as could be hoped for. Now, don't misunderstand. Shouta didn't wish any of his kids would be kidnapped. Well, maybe Mineta, but it wasn't as if he would ask for someone to take him. He just wouldn't be as concerned if they did. But he really hoped they hadn't taken. Fuck if I know. He's green and he's wearing a shirt that says pants. Fuck. If they had Izuku and they were calling Shouta an indeterminate amount of time after the fact, that meant there was a distant explosion from the direction of the dorms. Shouta would be buying Cementos a new car, a house, a lifetime supply of the most expensive bourbon he can find. At this point, to make up for all the property damage that was about to come. If they were lucky, Bakugo would find a teacher before running off to commit homicide. The sound of revving engines in the distance was not looking good on that front. Shouta scrambled out of bed, sending Bastard and Smash bolting from the room, yowling the whole way. Fortunately, he had enough awareness 20 minutes ago to change into his pink sweats and one of Hizashi's burningly yellow put your hands up radio shorts, so that all he really had to do was grab his capture scarf and shove his feet in his boots as he ran from the apartment. If Snipe was surprised to see the exhausted rainbow that was Shouta so early in the morning, it was overshadowed by the look of terror on his unmasked face as Shouta spoke into the phone he had pinned between his cheek and shoulder as he tugged one boot on. 3 things. 1. Don't misgender my kid. I will feed you your fucking teeth. 2. Tell them they're grounded because there's no way they didn't let you kidnap them. 3. I would recommend praying to whatever deity you believe in, or find one rather quickly. Snipe ran for the common room, banging on the few doors as he went. They were going to need all hands on deck to mitigate the disaster that was brewing. On the other side of the phone, the walking corpse stammered. Are you threatening me, Eraserhead? I have a gun to your kid's fucking head. I could shoot him right. Sure. Are they awake? Put them on speaker. Satisfied he wouldn't break his nose tripping in his laces, Shouta opted for the second-story window as he was sure the common room area would be a riot of pro-heroes trying to get most of their costumes and support gear together while tripping over one another. As much as he tolerated his coworkers and appreciated their quick action, wasting any time meant more of his hellspawn finding out who exactly was missing. As Shouta jumped, he saw a wall of ice form a ramp over the gates surrounding the dorms. Honestly, he was just glad that they hadn't let Toya burn a hole in the wall like last time. He was less glad to see several tactical jeeps peel away from the school, holding what he could only assume was all of his kids that couldn't fly or run faster than the cars could drive. He would be so proud of his class's vice president if she had used her power for anything other than mobilizing the murder team. Who was he kidding? He was proud anyway. Nem pressed an earpiece into his hand as she ran out of the teacher dorms, still wearing a pair of Shota's old athletic shorts and an Ingenium tank top along with a battered pair of combat boots that had been a part of her first-year costume. Shouta nodded and took just long enough to switch the call from his phone to the earpiece before swinging off with his capture scarf. The others would catch up. Probably. Dad? Izuku's voice was as anxious as ever, but without the undercurrent of pain or terror one would expect from having just been kidnapped. I thought I told you that you had to run with Tenya in the mornings, problem child, Shouta said as he took to the rooftops. He followed the SUVs holding his students, knowing that Yayorozu would have made another receiver for the tracker all of his children were to wear at all times. Izuku sputtered. I promise. All I did was go out for a stretch first while he fueled up, and then they grabbed me. And you let them because... Izuku muttered something that sounded suspiciously like math test. Shouta was going to ground them until they were gray. A streak of red shot past him as he jumped from one roof to the next, and Shouta had to hold back a sigh. Incoming. There was the sound of fumbling with his seatbelt and a click right before a loud crunching sound and the squealing of brakes. The call was nothing more than panicked screaming and thudding for several long moments before a familiar voice broke through the commotion. Where the fuck is my baby bird? At this point, Shouta was just glad he wouldn't be the only pro on scene. After all, Kigo at least had his license and had the legal ability to actually fight crime as opposed to his students and older adopted children. Is that fucking Hawks? No, it's another 5-foot bird man with a feather sword. Toya's dry voice came over the call. Shouta fought the urge to laugh. If he laughed now, then that was reinforcing bad behavior, or whatever parenting book Tensei had bought him as a joke said. Toya, don't you even fucking think about it. Shota's voice was firm as he threw himself to another rooftop. He was getting close. The sound of screaming civilians and emergency vehicles was getting louder. There was more shuffling and what sounded suspiciously close to a whine before Toya's voice came closer. But, Dad, they took the baby. You can't tell me that a little burn isn't deserved for taking the baby. I swear to God. Toya, you can join Izuku for their grounding if you keep this up. Toya groaned. Stop fucking staring at them and shoot, damn it! The first voice finally yelled, apparently breaking out of their Hawks-induced stupor. There was more rustling and a scream of, Toya! Before the call was lost in a rush of static. Shouta cursed and ran faster, finally clearing the last buildings a few minutes later to see what remained of the chaos. The road was blocked by 4 cars, one of which had a massive dent in the hood from what Shouta could only assume was Hawk's Landing, with his students' SUVs surrounding them on either side. The kidnappers were surrounded by Shota's kids in varying states of consciousness. Those that were aware enough looked between his kids with wide, terror-filled eyes, as they should, bound with a mix of quirk-suppressing cuffs and zip ties. The man that had to be the leader was curled up at Hawks' feet, rocking himself as he stared at Izuku with a mix of awe and fear that was common when dealing with his problem child. Izuku, for their part, was latched onto Toya like a koala, sobbing into the scarred man's neck. Not far from them was what once was probably a gun, but the metal had 5 indents around it, like a child had squeezed a piece of clay. Shouta took the time to glare at any of his students brave enough to meet his gaze. Jiro, Shoto, Uraraka, and Bakugo stared back. Hawks waved one of his feathers with a blood-flecked grin as he walked up to the 2 of them. He almost shot you! Izuku was sobbing, clutching at the former villain with streaks of green lightning still surrounding them. Toya huffed and tightened his arm around Izuku while one of his hands moved to tangle in green curls. He didn't, though, kid. Can't even after you broke the gun. Broke is an understatement. Shouta offered, even as he kicked the mangled gun further away from his kids. It may be broken, but he still didn't want the reminder upsetting Izuku more than they already were. Izuku didn't respond other than to extract one arm from around Toya to make grabby hands at him. Shouta went without too much complaint, wrapping an arm around each of them and pressing kisses into green curls and white locks that were mostly hidden from prying eyes. Ashido definitely cooed at them, but she seemed much more interested in joining the hug than taking pictures. This time, at least. By the time the cops came for statements, all 23 of his students, Shinso, Amajiki, and Tagada, weren't even in his class. How'd they even heard about Izuku's kidnapping? Hawks and Toya were wrapped up in the group hug. Every now and then, a hand would reach over the massive bodies to brush against a part of Izuku, as if to assure that they were still there. Even with the extra bodies, Izuku and now Shoto were refusing to be parted from Toya. Not that the white-haired man seemed to mind for all of his huffing and complaining. He was holding on to them just as tightly as they clung to him. Tsukauchi snorted when Shouta finally managed to extract himself from the mass of clingy children to reveal his outfit. But the detective was also holding out a coffee, so Shouta figured he would allow him to live another day. In the end, all of 1A missed their math test, as by the time all of them had given their statements and been rounded back up into the cars that Shouta would now have to find a place for, it was late afternoon. That was okay. Ectoplasm would have time to make a harder one as part of their punishment for sneaking off again. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That brings us to the end of part 3 of Shouta Aizawa and his feral children. There's one more part left so far in this series, and I will hopefully record that and post it later this week. I am wondering if anyone who works with Audacity knows how to get rid of the fan sound in the background. My PC fans can be heard, and it seems that no matter what noise reduction I do, they can still somewhat be heard. So if anyone has any tips on that, that would be awesome. Because I tried messing around with a bunch of settings, and it just made me sound like I have a major lisp. That was pretty much all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you, and see you guys again later this week.